Amy stood on the dock with the rain just flowing down around her. Oh, but she was just glad to be on solid ground. It was the 1890s, and Amy was a 26-year-old Irish girl who had just traveled halfway around the world to be a missionary in Japan. But while her ship was in the China Sea, a typhoon grabbed it, tossing it back and forth, back and forth. Amy never remembered ever being so sick. But to make things worse, suddenly a net scooped her up, her in her Victorian dress with its 3 petticoats and formal bonnet. The crane swung the net out over the open sea and finally deposited her on the deck of a tugboat. Her ship couldn't get into port, so it was decided that all the passengers should be transferred to the tugboat. Oh, if life on the ship was bad, it was nothing to compare to that tugboat as it chugged up, 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 up the mountain of water to go through the crest and fall down, down, down into the valley below to go up the other side. She didn't think she would live through the experience. But finally, she stood on the dock with her sea chest next to her. She just sat down and put her head in her hands and sighed. Then she looked up. A missionary was supposed to meet her here at the dock, but she couldn't see any white faces. They were all brown. She said, does anyone speak English? And all she heard were giggles. Can anyone help me? No one. She just put her head in her hands once again. Then she started to laugh. The more she thought about it, the more she laughed. She left her mother, her siblings, nieces and nephews, her church, her ministry, her language, to come halfway around the world to be a missionary to Japan. And here she sat, soaking wet, not 1 square inch of dry clothes on her, and she didn't know what to do. And all of this in the will of God. Suddenly, 2 Japanese men stood before her. They motioned for her to stand up. When she did, they took their pole and with hooks, and they hooked it on to the case and lifted it up between the 2 of them and walked off. One motion for her to follow. She looked around that possibly there was a white face, a missionary who had sent these men, but no, they were acting on their own. So she followed them. They went off the dock and into the street. She looked both ways, but the rain was so heavy she couldn't see very far. She followed them down the street, sloshing through the puddles. They finally came to a place where they had her wait. Then they summoned a rickshaw. They put the case on the rickshaw and then helped her into the seat. The man in front picked up the poles and off he went. It was then that she realized that those men had paid for this out of their own money. She didn't know where she was going, but it went about halfway across the city, and finally the man stopped, put down the poles, helped her get down, took the sea chest and put it on the road. With a slight bow, he picked up the poles and was gone. She didn't know what else to do but go to the closest door and knock on it. A man came to the door. When he opened it, he was shocked to see this young woman standing at his door. But he had a white face. And he spoke English. Well, sort of. It was probably more properly called American. He quickly had her come in and went out and got the sea chest. He set her down on a mat next to a low table and served her some tea. As the puddle around her got bigger and bigger and bigger, she told her story. Soon they were both laughing about the events of that day. He said, I don't know who was supposed to meet you at the dock, but I do know some missionaries. I'll send you there. Another rickshaw was summoned, sea chest and Amy, and off they went, except now she knew where she was going. The missionary family welcomed them into their home, served her some more tea, then drew a nice, warm, relaxing bath for her. After it was done, she put on the nice, clean, warm, dry clothes, and then enjoyed a delicious meal. They showed her to where she was going to spend the night. As Amy sat on the bed, she thought about her day, her first day on the foreign mission field. What a day. She laid down, and as she laid there on her pillow, and quickly fell asleep. But how could she know? How could she possibly know that this was the first day of 55 years on the mission field? Not in Japan, as she thought, but in India. And then how could she know that this day and the experiences that she had on this, her first day, be typical of her entire 55 years? Oh, the storms of life that she would face, the time of physical sickness that she would suffer, the nationals, some who would make fun of her and oppose her, others who would be generous to her, some of the missionaries who would be such a disappointment to her, and others that would be there to help her just when she needed it. And how could she know that the name Amy Carmichael would go down in history as one of the great missionaries of her time?